And I kind of wanted to talk today a little bit about like the simplicity and like the art of reclaiming simplicity just based off of nature. And like this arbitrary date of January 1st is not of nature. Like December 20th, 21st, whatever day that falls on, where the sun actually changes course, like something you can actually experience in time and space physically without anyone telling you, right? Like all the creatures know the moment the light returns, right? They feel it. And so we haven't had a conversation since the light returned. So the light has returned and things are different, but we are still in the belly of winter. And so, I'm never the one to like make New Year's goals on that date because it still feels like there's a lot um, of stillness, and there's a lot of waiting that has to happen before I really have the energy to kind of change. Like there's still a lot of reflection that needs to occur. So I'm curious in the chat if you've ever felt that. It's like people are like, oh, my New Year's resolution didn't work. Well, yeah, it wasn't the right time, right? It wasn't the right time to plant a seed because seeds don't grow in the middle of winter. And so we're in 2025 now and the calendar date has changed and everything, but I've never really felt that it has like affected me on a cellular level, like the sun shifting, like the seasons. And so that's why I love to bring seasonal wellness into these calls. And kind of what I wanted to talk about today is really reclaiming our simple nature. And it's interesting because, I don't watch the news. I only hear about things if like, my partner tells me or, people online tell me things. And so yesterday when all the fires broke out in LA, in like West LA, where I've had many little houses along my path, and a lot of my friends' houses burnt down, and like a lot of intense stuff is happening right now. It was like bringing me back to like I was in the Woolsey fire and when I was pregnant, and like everything in Malibu burnt down except for like our little house and the houses around us, and we still couldn't live there, and it was devastating. It was a devastation. And it brought me back to like one of the biggest things that I teach and why it changes, right? Life is changing all the time. And so nature is very capricious. Like she will change, and we have to learn to adapt, but find our own inner sense of self. And so, oh, hello, Aria, catching you for the first time. I hope I said your name right. Welcome in, welcome in. These are little spiritual conversations. And so I remember when I left my accounting job and I like had my whole apartment filled with like blazers and suits, and I had like booked a plane ticket to India, and I wanted to go do my teacher training for yoga, and I was like 22 and so little and just so brave. And I remember like slowly having to like get rid of all of my belongings. And so at first I like boxed them up and like put them in a friend's house, and I was like, okay, I'm going to come back for these. And then I went traveling out of a backpack for 6 months and just fell in love with like me, with myself, with like not having all of these things of the world holding me down. And so I remember going back home and selling everything or just getting rid of everything. So I had nothing. And that was probably one of the biggest moments for me learning the art of non-attachment. And so this is part of returning to the simple essence of you, is understanding that the things that you have, right, that you hold are just impermanent, temporary things that, yes, your soul is using to express itself in this human dimension, but it's not who you are. It's just an extension of who you are. And so what I really wanted to bring through today is just really asking you the question of like, where in your life do you feel overwhelmed? Like, do you feel like it's too much? Like, do you feel like you work too much? Do you feel like your relationships are too much? Like, what is taking too much of your time that it almost feels like a little bit chaotic? And if you're brave enough, you can put it in the chat. If you don't know what it is, if it feels like everything, I really want you to dial into like, there's something that you're doing, right? There's one part of your life where you feel like, oh, this is taking away time from what I really want to be doing. And what you really might want to be doing is like closing your eyes and taking a couple deep breaths. It might be painting, it might be doing yoga, it might be like just laying down and doing a meditation, like whatever that is for you. We all have this part of our life where we tend to like overdo it and tend to create this sense of overwhelm, which takes us out of, right, this art of finding the simplicity inside of ourselves. And so I really wanted to dive into like the essence of you and your being and how to that are taking our time, that are making it too busy for us to do the thing that we want to do, right? When we're feeling like we're going on autopilot, when we're feeling like in winter we're doing too much. Like if you are doing anything outside of sunrise and sunset, it's too much because the big obedience of the seasons is that you're moving in alignment with nature. And so this is where the simple art of going out for the sunrise, me and my daughter ate our steaks for breakfast right at sunrise, right? Or going to bed or going in at sunset, right? Being there for sunset and then going inside of your house. And then the darkness, this is where it's time for you. And so in winter, I remember in my accounting firm, I would be going, because I lived in Canada then, I would be going to work and it was pitch black outside. I would be leaving work and it was pitch black outside. And I was so depressed and I couldn't figure out why. And I clicked one day and I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I'm supposed to be available for the sunrise. I shouldn't be doing anything until that sun has risen because my energy is not ready for the day. And so when we start to resist what is happening in nature, right, our body starts to feel tension, starts to feel constriction. This is where dis-ease and disharmony sets in because our body is carefully calibrated to the natural rhythms, right? It's carefully calibrated to sunrise and sunset. And when we don't go out in the sun, when we're staring at our screens all day, right? When we're not using like blue light blockers, when we're on our screens, like we are creating these cascades of hormones in our body that are not supportive of our health and well-being. And so a lot of this return to simplicity is knowing where your life is out of the natural order and just simple ways to return it to the natural order. So what are little things that you can do to give yourself more time inside of your house in winter to read a book, right? And one of the books that I love that I don't know if you guys know, but I wrote this book, The Wild Rhythms, and it was really to return you to nature, right? Because when you're practicing yoga, you're changing your practice based on the seasons. If you were just watching my reels or in my email sequence, I was doing a 7-day like sequence to teach you 7 simple postures, winter postures that you can do to support your kidneys, to support going within, turning within, lower body, like substantiation, willpower, just like working with fear in your body, because that's where it lives in the kidneys, right, in winter. And so when we move with the seasons, we're changing our practices with the seasons, we're changing our clothes with the seasons, we are really orienting ourselves to nature. And so I know many of us have like jobs that are demanding maybe 8 hours a day from us or 9 hours or 10 hours, right? Sometimes there's things in your life that you can't just change so quickly, right? I totally understand that. And so it's really where in your life can you find simple ways that you can reclaim these really simple parts of yourself? Because every time you do this, you come home to a part of yourself, right? You come home to a part of your soul because your soul is imprinted with, right, the 5 lights of consciousness. If you've read my Soulful Seasons ebook, that materializes as these 5 organs, these 5 elements that go through these 5 seasons that I speak about all the time. And so when we can just orient parts of ourselves to these greater rhythms that are timeless, right? The law of polarity, right? Every up has a down, every in has it out, every center has a circumference, right? The art of pattern. We are all pattern. The arch of your foot is the same arch and wave that's moving through your whole body. And so people that are flat-footed will have a hard time getting up in the morning, and people with super high arches are like, hi, let's go, me. And so it's all patterned, right? We're patterned with these proportions in our body, and we're a fractal, right, of the cosmos. And so when we want to understand what is really going on outside of ourselves, all we have to do is look within. And then the art of repetition. The seasons happen again and again, right? Your patterns happen again and again. Your soul is going through lifetimes again and again. And so how are you going to start to use it to your advantage? And I really want to bring through this, like, at the depths of you, do you know what your soul feels like? Like, do you ever just close your eyes and just sit in your essence and like feel? Like, I really invite you to take up this really simple practice, like once a day for 5 minutes. Just close your eyes and breathe and just feel what you feel like deeper than all of the transitory emotions, mental fluctuations, like tension in the body, things that are arising in your day-to-day experience. Like, there is an essence inside of you that is so unique, that's not separate, but that's individuated, right? Unique, a unique expression of creation. And so that essence and that frequency and that blueprint, every time we get the feeling in our realities that I've come home, whether you put on a soft cashmere sweater and you're like, oh, I just came home to myself, right? Or you put on like big gold jewelry and you're the type of person that likes gold and you're like, oh, I just came home to myself. Like, it's beyond the material thing, but it's a style. Like, your soul has a style, and as we deepen into us and ourselves and alignment with nature and simplicity, right? Like, taking away that which is taking us away from ourself, from the simple practice of tuning into ourself, right? The moment we start to come home to these deeper layers of ourself, everything in life just starts to feel so much easier. And of course, things will come up that are loud and annoying, and and we have to deal with it, because there's going to be conflict when we get deeper with our soul of like, oh, this doesn't need to be in my reality anymore. Or I let this slide in because I wasn't actually in my unique individuation, right? I was trying to please this person, or I was trying to show up this way for this person. There's where we disassociate from our soul and are like, okay, how do I like be validated in this experience, or whatever it is. And so when we tap into again and again, right, this simple practice of like, close your eyes, feel how you feel those parts of your life that feel so good, where you wish you had more time for, or where when you're doing it, you're just like, oh my God, this is me. Like, when I'm doing yoga, I'm like, oh my God, this is me. Like, I just love it so much. I can't tell you how much I love it. And we all have this unique thing and this unique frequency and this unique essence that wants to come through and participate, right? And that's a big key, is that like there's moments in time to participate and moments in time to retreat and to refine what that is. And so when you start to shed these layers of like, this is my home, this is where I live, these are the people in my life, this is my relationship, this is my daughter, this is my son, this is like, this and this and this and this. Like, when you start to shed all of those layers, just peeling them back and being like, no, those things are not me, but who am I? Right? Isn't that the biggest question in yoga? Who am I? And so there's no greater sense of security than being in that question and feeling that frequency again and again. And you might not feel it the first time. There might be a lot of distortions and layers and veils that have slid in from the conditioning, from culture, from parents, from the imprinting that you saw when you were a child, from governments, from institutions, like so many layers of like, actually, who am I? I think people call this like the dark night of the soul, when you start to question these things and it's like, this is not my job, this is not what I wanted to do, this is not where I wanted to be. And it's like, all of a sudden it's all closing in on you, and like, you've seen too much, and you can't be okay with the reality anymore that you've created. And so in my 20s, when I was backpacking and living out of nothing, there are various ways that I'll share with you, that you can use or not use, but dove deeper into, who I actually was. And in the East, of course, there's many teachings and ways and monasteries you can go to learn this stuff, and in the West as well. But one of the ways that I began to learn more about myself, that I will share with you so you can also think about these things, is I would notice where my thoughts were looping all the time, right? You sit in meditation and you're like, oh my God, like you're ruminating on maybe like a conversation you had with someone, or someone said something to you, or you're meditating and you start thinking about like pancakes. I don't know, right? You're meditating and you start thinking about like, you just start to loop these circles of things that are not okay, basically, in your reality, that you're like obsessing over, right? And this is like mental mastication. Like your mind is chewing on these ideas again and again and again, taking away energy from what it is that your soul wants to express in this human dimension. And so I started to do like 10-day meditations. And of course, you don't have to do the extreme things, right? But it's like in meditation, what comes up? What are the thoughts that come up? Do you start to notice patterns that arise that are taking you from that essence of who you are? And so in order to uncover what that is, you have to sit with yourself and start to listen to your innermost thoughts and the things that you are telling yourself again and again and again. And I really want to say, like, this is not your soul telling you this. This is like oftentimes like our parents when we were a child in our head. And so, if we have an inner critic, our parents were highly critical of us. And so that little voice has stayed in our head, like, you're doing it wrong. You shouldn't be doing it that way. Like, you're not going to be good enough. And that's how we felt as a child because our parents were not, supporting us in the way that we needed to be supported or whatever it was. Right. And so that the inner dialogue is something that you've adopted basically from what you were told, how you were treated, the things that you heard from a teacher, from an institution, like whatever it is. And so when you begin to watch your mind, right, and this is like a lot of the practices of winters, you have more darkness to sit with yourself, right? More darkness to like be like, okay, I'm just gonna have to start having a conversation, like what's inside of me. And the mind is like filled with a cast of characters, let's call it, right? There's a cast of characters in your mind, and they're telling you a whole bunch of different things, and it's actual insanity, if you really sit with your mind. But if you take it very lightly and just see it as like a window into a lot of the and deeply held part of my mind says this. When I'm in this part of my life, my mind is telling me this, right? And you just start to notice them because the moment something is observed, it's going to change its behavior. You're going to start noticing it louder and louder and louder. And it's going to eventually, right, when you hold it in love and not judgment of like, oh my God, this is like not okay. It is okay. It's fine. It's perfect. It's like who you are, what you came in with, and it's what you get to release now, right? Just hold it in love. And eventually it's like that thought will be there and you're not going to be as like hard on yourself about it. You're just like, oh, I remember that one. That's silly. You just like choose a different story. You don't have to know that that is a truth about you. It's just what you're shedding and what you're releasing. And so that's one of the ways to start to learn the essence of you is to just watch your mind. And so in the mind, many things will come up because we all have many hooks and like things in our reality that make us feel safe that we don't have to actually look inside. And so for many people, one of the safeties is food, right? It's like there's like a few. It's like the physical safeties: food, sex, money, water, right? Like, and so like when I started fasting, I was like, oh my God, all my mind wants to do is eat. Like it would be like, okay, you're gonna do a fast. This is what we're gonna do before. We are gonna go eat those pancakes. We are gonna go like, go to that restaurant and we're gonna go over here and then we're gonna like fill up and then we're gonna like sit there and I'm just gonna like watch my mind be like, oh my God, we're gonna die. Like, how is this body gonna go on? And it's like literally nothing. It's no big deal. And you start to watch it to the point where you're putting yourself to the edge of like, oh, I survived. It's okay. And you go and like have the pancakes after the fast. All you were thinking about was the pancakes. And you eat them and you're like, oh, those weren't that good. And so you're starting to retrain yourself. You're starting to remove things and come back to them with a different lens, right? Noticing how much, again, your mind is masticating on the physical dimension, how much it needs things to feel safe, even though it really doesn't need these things, right? And another one is money. If we're always like obsessed with like, okay, like, I don't know what it is for everyone, right? Like if you're just obsessed with like making more money or you're obsessed with like looking at your bank account all the time or like not looking at your bank account because it's like always scary over there and you're just like, oh, I don't have enough money for rent again. Like I'm just like going to ignore it. And so, there's ways that our mind is hooked on the financial aspect of reality. When like, I just want you to know, like when you sit with yourself and you sit with your soul and the simplicity of it, you actually cannot control anything that's going to happen to you at all. And this is what I wanted to bring it all back to is that in the simplicity of your soul, there's nothing that needs to be done. In the simplicity of your soul, you're totally okay, right? When you remove, again, all of these things that we're striving towards as a society, the goals, there's nothing wrong with this, right? It's beautiful to have goals. It's beautiful to have a vision. It's beautiful to have like something to live for and an impact to make and people in your life. But the point is knowing that that does not define you. Nothing outside of you defines you as a soul and your worth and your value. And so when we can tap into the deepest essence of ourselves, everything could burn down in a fire and we'd be like, okay, that was the will of my soul in this moment. And I'm okay. I am alive, right? And so when we work with nature and we work with the simplicity of us in nature, even if we're living in a city, right? Even if, we're like, oh, the sun rises over there and my apartment's over here and I'm never looking at the sun. The simple act of leaving your house and just being there for sunrise and letting that beautiful red light hit your face. The simple act of just being aware and observant of the sunset. This is how we reclaim our health and the simplicity of being in alignment with nature. And really the truth of like, we should be so grateful, right? The ancients used to go out at sunrise every single day because they did not take it for granted, right? The fact that it rises in the same place, right? It moves, but it's always on the east and it sets on the west. Like, that's a miracle. It's a miracle that we can predict the seasons so that we can plant our crops through seeing the patterns and the repetition of it happening again and again. And so, like these simple laws, these simple laws, when you can tap into them and really appreciate them and weave them into your life. And like, that's why I wrote this book in 2020, and I'll actually link it in the replay to like the e-version. I have a few physical copies left, but so that you really could just understand what is spring, what is summer, what is autumn, what is winter, where those live in the phases of your life, where those live in the day, where those live in the greater seasons, right? What are these timeless laws and principles of like celebration? And celebration is not January 1st. So no, like if you didn't have a calendar, you would never know what date that was, right? The celebration of nature was winter solstice, summer solstice, spring equinox, autumn equinox, because there was a visible moment in time that everything changed, right? Where when the sun passed the threshold of the winter solstice, no longer was it in its declination. Right now, all of a sudden, it's in its inclination to the summer solstice. And so light has returned. And it's obvious because you'll start to see the sun move in the different direction, right? If you had a sundial, you'd see it, right? That's why they built those sundials, because they wanted to know the exact moment in time where it was like, oh my God. And all of nature knows it. It's like rejoicing, right? And then same thing with the autumn and the spring. This is quickening time, right? The way that the elliptical is. And so just the rotation, the revolution makes spring fast and it makes autumn fast. You feel that quickening energy, right? Where even in the spring of your life, you're like growing really quick. And then in the summer of your life, there's this big pause and you kind of look the same for a little while. And then in the autumn of your life, you start to deteriorate pretty quickly. Like you start to shrink down and get more wrinkles and all this, right? Like it's part of the seasons. And so in spring, it's like quickly there's more and more and more and more sun. And right past the threshold of equality, 12 hours, right? In the spring, it's to the summer solstice, like light has overtaken darkness. And then in autumn, right, the moment it hits that 12, the 12 and 12 hours, right when you pass the autumn equinox, darkness has overtaken light. And so there's such a different energy. I mean, it's very palpable. There's an energy of urgency in the autumn, where in spring, it's a different urgency. It's like, let's get out there. In autumn, it's like, let's gather everything and get in. And so when we can just take simple acts and align ourselves with that which is nature, right? And really understand nature where you are, because nature where I am is not nature where you are. You might be in the cold of the snow in winter, and I'm in sunshine and like, middle California on the ocean where it's like kind of sunny and nicer in the winter than in the summer. And so it's always where you are, learning how to be observant to where you are so that you empower yourself in your health, in your well-being, tools that like you don't need me for, but I'm going to give you the codes and the keys to open your eyes and look around you and to be like, okay, it doesn't matter where I go, I can start to tap into the simplicity of the sun is rising. I should be there for it. The sun is setting. I'm going to be there for it, And so I'm curious, pop it in the chat. I'll be listening as like, I want you to reclaim one of these acts, whatever it is, in everything that you've heard today, where you're like, I'm going to put this into practice because this feels like something I need to do. Pop it in the chat because I want you to be accountable to it and I want to witness it and I want to read some of them. But when we really like realize how fragile, like we as human, we're so resilient and fragile. Like all of this is so fragile too. Everything could be gone in a moment. And you as a consciousness would never leave. There's something beyond the physical body, everything that's around you that you're seeing, the physical world that we've all agreed upon. There's something lasting, eternal inside of you that is timeless, that has been here for all time, that is so reassured beyond a shadow of a doubt that like death is an illusion, right? That like there's no end. After winter, spring always comes back. There's no end. And so just that alone allows us to take a different approach to life.